Hi there, I'm Ben Leo and this is GBN Originals, where we can have open discussions about the things that really matter to you. And today it's none other than my favourite, Covid-19, the pandemic and the role of vaccines in apparently ending it. Now, we've all heard the promises, haven't we? The vaccines were supposed to be our ticket out of the mess. They were our golden key, allegedly, back to normality. But as we look at the excess death figures, a slightly different story emerges. Let's start with the bold claims made about these vaccines. We were told they could reduce symptomatic infections by over 90%. Remember? Safe and effective. Sounded impressive at the time, didn't it? But here's where it gets interesting. By the end of May 2023, a whopping 270 million Americans had been vaccinated. That's out of a total population of about 340 million. Now, if these vaccines were as safe and effective as claimed, you'd probably expect the number of COVID cases to plummet. But guess what? Over 100 million confirmed cases were reported by that point. And it doesn't take a mathematician to see that something doesn't quite add up. So let's break it down, shall we? If 270 million people were vaccinated, that leaves about 70 million unvaccinated. Are we really expected to believe that nearly all of these unvaccinated folk were the ones getting infected? I mean, that, for me, is completely absurd. But this is where it gets even more bizarre. A study by the Cleveland Clinic showed that the more jabs people had, the more likely they were to catch COVID. You heard that right. The more vaccines you have, the more chance you have of infection. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, but surely the vaccines must have reduced deaths, right? Well, hold on to your hats, because this is where it gets really interesting. The clinical trials, you know, the ones that were supposed to prove how great the vaccines were, they didn't show any differences in mortality between the vaccinated groups and the placebo groups. Who would have thought? So what happened to the grand strategy, the one that was supposed to save us all and get us back to normal life?
Us blokes hate talking about a little thinning up top, and many of us settle with that balding look, but that wasn't for me, and that's why I went to Elite Hair, the world's leading hair loss clinic, and now I've had over 4,000 new hairs added to this barnet, and very soon I'm going to be rocking some brand new flowing locks, and you can too. So how does it work? Step 1, I sent the team a set of photos of my head. Step 2, I then spoke to one of the Elite Hair staff who looked through my photo submissions and worked out a treatment plan for me. Step 3, Elite Hair then organised accommodation and the treatment. I was at their state-of-the-art treatment centre in Istanbul, and their incredibly kind staff took me through the process, and before I knew it, I was in surgery. Elite Hair and their leading medical experts have specialised in pain-free treatments using the sleep deep method, and they really mean that. I felt incredibly relaxed the whole time, and I haven't felt any pain since. Check out Elite Hair using the link in the description. When you do, Elite Hair will provide you with a free personalised hair analysis. Then you'll join over 100,000 happy patients. Hit that link and start your hair growth journey like I did today.
Well, the reality is that waves of infection and excess mortality continued after the vaccines were rolled out. We saw 2 severe waves in the US, didn't we? With deaths peaking again at the end of January 2022. Yeah, sure, there was a trend of declining peaks, but it's not clear that this trend had anything to do with the vaccination campaign. It's what you'd probably expect over the course of any pandemic, vaccine or no vaccine. Now, the powers that be, of course, would have us believe that while the vaccines might not have stopped infections, they somehow reduced hospitalizations and deaths from COVID-19. How many times did we hear that? Think about this logically for a moment. How on earth can a vaccine fail to prevent infection, but still manage to reduce illness? It defies common sense, doesn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, recent papers are emerging as smoking guns showing that this grand strategy simply didn't work. But here's where it gets really interesting. The narratives in these papers often conclude that the strategy was a success. It saved millions of lives. It's only when you dig into the actual data that a different story emerges. Take, for example, a study based on patients from the US Veterans Health Administration. The authors concluded that COVID-19 was associated with higher long-term mortality compared to influenza or RSV. Sounds scary for the normal person, right? But when you look at the actual figures, the difference in mortality over 180 days was less than 1%. Let that sink in for a moment. Less than 1%. Is that really the once-in-a-century pandemic we were told would devastate our population? Is that worth throwing the entire world into a state of emergency? The stock market's crashed, economic nightmares, our kids being starved of education and a social life. And it doesn't stop there. A recent study from Norway looked at all-cause mortality in the adult population during 2021 to 2023. And the authors concluded that vaccinated individuals had a lower rate of all-cause death. But when you actually look at the data properly, it shows the complete opposite. For the oldest age group, 65 and above, the deaths per 100,000 people increased from 3.40 with no doses to 7.25 with 1 to 2 doses to 19.21 with 3 or more doses. Yet somehow, through some statistical wizardry, they concluded that vaccination reduced mortality. How? It's mind-boggling, isn't it? But perhaps the most damning evidence comes from a study of all patients diagnosed with COVID-19 from Brazil from 2020 to 2023. Now get this, the authors found that while there was a protective effect from vaccination for up to a year after the first symptoms, after that, the effect reversed. Completely reversed. You heard that right. After a year, there was an increased risk of death for those vaccinated. Now we've all heard the claims about millions of lives saved by vaccination, but here's the thing. These claims are based on modelling, not real-world data. And as we've seen from time to time, again with the likes of climate change even, models can be manipulated to show whatever the modelers want them to show. The evidence is clear. The grand strategy to end the pandemic through vaccination has failed. The excess deaths figures tell a different story from the one we've been sold. It's time for some hard questions and honest answers. I want to leave you with this thought. In a free society, the more our individual liberties are restricted by public health measures, the more solid evidence we should demand from their effectiveness. It's just not enough for governments and the health establishment to trample all over our freedoms based on theories, models and predictions. We deserve better. We deserve the truth. This is Ben Leo. Thank you for watching and don't forget to subscribe to GB News YouTube for much more.
Hello and welcome, I am Patrick Christys and this is GBN Originals. COVID vaccine liability and government costs. Let's get stuck right in, shall we? The ongoing COVID inquiry has unveiled startling information about the UK government's anticipation of vaccine-related injuries. Documents presented to the inquiry show that the government actually expected a potential £1.7 billion bill for injuries caused by the coronavirus vaccine. This figure raised critical questions about the safety protocols surrounding the rapid development of vaccines and the legal protections afforded to pharmaceutical companies. So they made the vaccines quickly. They absolutely hammered anyone who didn't want to take one of them. But then they also protected the pharmaceutical companies. Does that not seem a little bit rum? So Lord Sharma, who served as business secretary during the vaccine rollout, testified that this figure was based on the understanding that COVID vaccines were developed at a, quote, much faster pace and did not undergo the, quote, extensive clinical trials that would usually be the norm. Were we all told that at the time, were we?